What's up, everybody? We're here with another live event. I've got my friend Hollis, and obviously Matt's here, my co-host. I do have Hollis's bio pulled up so I can read it to you guys. Hollis is the principal at 24 Capital Group, a real estate private equity firm based in Connecticut that specializes in helping real estate professionals take back time and own their futures by investing passively in cash flowing real estate deals. Hollis's passion for real estate began when he was a kid, watching his family's landlord collect rents. As he got older, he became an expert in creating opportunities and finding deals and is committed to staying at the forefront of the latest technologies. Hollis is also dedicated to sharing his knowledge and expertise with others, regularly speaking at real estate conferences across the country. After growing 24 Capital Group's asset portfolio to over 80 properties in 2022, Hollis is excited to tackle new opportunities and to continue making a positive impact on the real estate community. All right. So without any further ado, we will bring on Hollis. Hey, Hollis, how are you?
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So we usually start and just have you give us your origin story, kind of warm us up, and how you got into real estate, and then how you got into capital raising.
Yeah, sure. So, like you read in the bio, man, it goes back to I must have been like 6 or 7 years old. I grew up in Hollis, Queens, just like my name, and my landlord would come by every first of the month. It's the '90s, he's collecting rents in cash, right? So he's literally stuffing. I'm watching him stuff money into his wallet to the point where it no longer would fold. It was so thick that it wouldn't fold. And so I remember sitting there thinking, like, man, I don't know how Mr. Carter owns all these houses in the neighborhood, but I have to figure out how to do that. So that was kind of when I first caught the bug. To be honest, though, growing up in Queens, inner city community, my family didn't have much, economically. And obviously in the Northeast, Mark, real estate is insanely expensive in most areas. So I never really understood how I could actually go out and accomplish that goal and start acquiring those properties. So many years went by, probably almost 20 years went by, 15 years. And randomly, a buddy of mine calls me up and says, hey, I'm going to this real estate meetup near your house. Do you want to come? I was like, sure, why not? Mind you, I'd always wanted to start to learn, and I didn't know he was into real estate as well. So we ended up kind of connecting on that and later became business partners. But we went to that conference, and there was a speaker there who was talking all about wholesaling real estate. And that concept blew my mind. So for those who don't know, wholesaling is basically just finding people who need to sell their properties and putting them under contract. Then you go back and sell your rights to that property for a profit or for a spread to an investor. So I saw that opportunity to get into the game, so to speak, without needing a lot of money. And so I started out there. I quickly realized I had just created another job for myself. Wholesaling is a ton of work. And I wanted to actually start owning some of the properties. So I went back to the drawing board, started underwriting or analyzing more deals in the area. And I realized that the bigger I went, the more profit there was to go around, and deals just started to make more sense looking at larger properties. So once that happened, I also realized, man, I'm going to need even more money than I thought I needed in the first place, right? So
Right.
I started looking at, how to bring on partners into deals and raise equity, and eventually got around to starting 24 Capital Group, and here we are today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I typically don't advise new investors to start wholesaling. It's like the number one thing that they want to start with. And Matt can probably attest to this. They'll come, they'll say, hey, I'm going to be an investor and I'm going to start wholesaling. And I just look at them, I'm like, it's a lot of work. You need a lot of skills. It still takes money, even though, I'd love to hear how you did it for low cost. But when I'm thinking wholesaling, I'm thinking I got to touch these people like 12 different ways to get them to call me. And that's, mailers and different types of mailers. And it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I can totally appreciate that story, Hollis. You're like, damn, like I tell people all the time, if you are the most important person in your business, you don't own a business, you own a job. And that one, wholesaling is just another job, flipping houses is another job. And what really attracted to me with buy and hold is that this concept, you can do a lot of work, but then get paid in perpetuity in the form of cash flows over time. Whereas when you sell that property, that's the last time that property paid you. So that's why I'm like a buy and hold. We sell some stuff once in a while, but I'm more of a long-term person.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. The wholesaling, people always talk about getting into real estate with no money. Doing it with absolutely no money is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there.
So how did you start in wholesaling? Maybe take us down that path and, what were your efforts like trying to do it on a shoestring budget? And then did you eventually cave and say, hey, I got to throw some money at this thing if I'm going to get some stuff to stick, or how did that work?
Yeah, man. Great question. Great question. So I went to YouTube University, of course, and
Hmm.
I bought the dream, man. I was like, people like, you just, buy a list for $100, make some phone calls, and you just, make calls until you get a deal. And then once you have a deal, people will just come buy it. It's like, no problem, right? So I believe that for maybe all of like 3 days. Having started businesses before, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy, but I'm a tech guy by trade, so I'm a software engineer. So at every turn, I've always looked for the ability to leverage technology in these things. So immediately, unlike some of my counterparts who started wholesaling around the same time, I went out and got a CRM, but I found like the cheapest one I could. It was like $50 a month with unlimited users and all this, and unlimited contacts. And with that, I was able to send my text blast and do my cold calling, and I was doing it most of it myself. And then my partner would handle the dispositions. Spent a ton of time on Facebook.
Yeah.
A ton of time on Facebook, but it was really good for finding leads as well as for disposition of property. So that really did help to keep the budget very low, but it was so hard to scale. It was so hard to get past doing, one deal here and there because I was doing most of the work myself, and I still had a full-time job. I only have a very, very limited amount of time. So eventually I did, like you said, I threw some money at it, hired a virtual assistant who started, handling some of that work for us. And honestly, I kind of started to do more of just the quarterbacking and transaction coordination from my armchair, as I like to call it, which helped us scale the business a little bit more.
Did you find that like direct mail, was that part of your campaign, or did you stay more online focused?
Yeah, I've never done direct mail. I was all cold calling. I did some Facebook ads, and what was really good was the text blast, just because it didn't take any time. You could send as many as you want to if you had enough phone numbers to kind of cycle through. And the texting at least got the highest response rate. I don't know if it had the highest close rate necessarily, but at least people were responding to those text messages.
Okay. Yeah, I do get a lot of those texts like, hey, will you sell me your house? And then I reply back, sure. And then a lot of times they don't even like respond again. So they must be sending out millions of texts.
Yeah. I was there. You get nervous. Like if you've never had that sales conversation before, because the barrier to entry with wholesaling is so low, a lot of people who just really have no ability to negotiate, to close deals, anything, that's how they get started, which is fine. But then when someone actually responds, it's like, what do I say next?
Right.
It's like a dog chasing a car, man. Like, this dude wouldn't even know what to do with it when they got it. But, I do the same thing. I respond to those texts. I even like the direct mail that I get, because I still own a lot of smaller multifamily. The direct mail I get, I call those people. I mean, and I know that they're wholesalers. I always ask them, like, are you the direct buyer? Oh yeah, we're buying. I'm like, are you a wholesaler? It's like, yeah, I'm a wholesaler. I was like, well, all right, well, you know what? How about instead of making like a $20,000 assignment fee, how would you like to make a couple $100,000 and find me an apartment deal that's 100 plus units or blah, 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 blah. And so I always plant that seed. Nobody's ever like, they're always like focusing on, stealing little old ladies' equity and stuff like that out of their house.
They're focusing on the YouTube University, right? They should listen to you.
Man. The YouTube. I do the same thing though. Whenever I get those calls too, and text, and I'm always like, hey, I'll buy your deals. Maybe like I'm not going to sell you mine, but send me your deals. So I always try to, like you said, nothing's ever come of it, but we'll see.
Yeah, just get on a lot of lists. I think I'm probably on 4 or 5 lists here in Rochester, but I would say they're the main ones, right? There's not too many other people in the space, and these guys have been doing it for seems to be decades at this point.
Yeah. So Hollis, kind of changing gears here. Like, how did you parlay the skills you acquired in terms of how you started in real estate? I mean, you invested in a CRM system and text blast and that sort of thing. How'd you parlay those skills into what you do now as a fundraiser?
Yeah, great question. I kind of find that there is a lot of overlap. One thing I didn't realize, thinking I wanted to get into real estate or do real estate, right, is that most of it is just marketing, which seems like that's what most of any business is. It's just marketing, especially in this day and age of digital marketing. People will almost close themselves. Like if your sequences are set up right and your funnels are set up right, and people are so warm by the time they actually get to talk to you, all you have to do is tell them where to sign usually. And so it was great because I actually used the same CRM I used for wholesaling for my private equity placement deals, my deal room, everything. I use the same CRM because I know it so well. I'm really familiar with it, and it's still dirt cheap. So that was really great. And also, I think it helped me build a lot of confidence wholesaling. Cold calling, you do it enough time, you get some thick skin, helps you build up your gumption a little bit. And I've always done public speaking just throughout life, so that's always been a really translatable skill as well.
So what were the biggest challenges in that transition?
Man, getting out of my own way. Talking about like limiting beliefs and kind of putting yourself in a box. When I started wholesaling, I was already making plenty of money. I certainly could have just gone out and started trying to buy rental property or, did an owner occupied deal or something like that. But in my mind, I was just like, oh, I can't afford real estate. I just always, from that 7-year-old me, I grew up thinking, oh, this is always just going to be too expensive. I can't afford it. So transitioning from, buying small deals for $200,000, $300,000, $100,000 into now looking at large deals and saying, hey, okay, we need to go raise $500,000, right? And the deal itself is $2 or $3 million or whatever the case may be. Man, that was intimidating. Honestly, it's still intimidating, to be honest. Right? Like you see a deal come across your table and it's like, oh, $26 million. Oh. Right? So I think that was really the biggest hurdle, was in a way convincing myself that I was capable and worthy, and that it's not it's that it can really work and it can really happen.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of that is just like leveraging relationships and the partnerships. And we met through a mastermind that we're both part of, and it's been awesome being able to tap into people that have a lot of experience in a lot of different kind of niche areas and see how they do it. And usually they're willing to come along if you can find a deal, and it's a good fun community kind of place.
Yeah, for sure. And to touch on that some more, I think someone told me, I asked a guy who has a ton of experience here locally. He's been raising capital for years, very, very experienced in different types of real estate investing. And I asked him, what's going to be the key to success if I want to raise capital? And he says, you're going to need to have a strong network. And I think oftentimes we think about our networks like, oh yeah, these are just all the people who I know and it's cool. And like, we all kind of hang out and we go to the networking events and drink beer or whatever. But it took a bit of a mental shift to say, hey, you actually need to change your network, right? I'm going from wholesaling, which if you're not doing it at scale is kind of a small time game, unless you're doing it at scale. It's a pretty simple. The people in that space are probably not the same people who are in the private equity space, who are going to be your limited partners or syndication partners in deals. So when it came to the network, I actually had to change who my network was pretty significantly. The types of events I went to, I basically don't go to free networking events anymore. Mm-hmm. If the price tag is not significant enough, I know that the people there are probably not the people who I need to network with. So
yeah, that's a really good point.
That was something I had to pivot with.
Yeah. So what networking events are you doing now? Like what would you suggest and recommend for other people that might be trying to get into the capital raising space and looking to network?
Yeah, sure. So if you're in the New York area, Rob Beardsley, you can find him on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. His event LSC in New York was the first high ticket event that I had gone to. And it was incredible. He throws a very quality event. The people in that room are premium. It's the Lone Star Capital event. It's actually coming up, I believe, in August or October, if I'm not mistaken, in New York City. The other thing I recommend, and this is what I do, I mostly only go to events where I'm going to be a speaker. And I know it's super selfish, but I have an 18-month-old, and my time is extremely limited. So if I'm going out for the night, it needs to be really, really worth it. So try to get on stages. I recently joined a few local real estate organizations. Some of them are paid sponsorships, some of them are free. And just as soon as you get in there, just start talking to the owners of the organization and try to get on stages for as many of their events as possible. And that way, even if the event is free for everyone else, you're going to be featured and you're going to get a ton of value out of showing up there.
Yeah. That's really great advice. What are you doing to seek out these free, rather than paying for a sponsorship? Anybody could do that. What are you doing for the free ones? How are you navigating that?
So fortunately, in my area, there's a good amount of events, and someone's actually put together a list. There's a running list of the events. So I go through and I just try to find who's throwing the event. And, if I know it's going to work with my schedule, then I'll just reach out to them directly and say, hey, if you ever need a speaker, I give them my one pager and work it like that. Also, Eventbrite is really good, and piggyback off of the paid sponsorship. So I paid for a sponsorship with one community, and I know that the people in that community, the board members, host smaller events of their own. And so again, being really, really hyper engaged in the community lands other opportunities for you.
Now, here's a random question. Have you ever considered, I don't know what you're speaking about, but I've kind of gone through the same thought process in my mind. And I'm thinking, as I'm talking to people in the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, I could really flip my script and talk about a variety of different things that might cross over to other disciplines. So have you considered that, or are you mainly talking about real estate when you go up there on stage?
I almost never talk about real estate.
Okay.
So for multiple reasons. One is I don't want to slip up and start conditioning the market and get fined or something like that on the back end, which actually almost happened to me the other day. I had to call back a podcast guy and be like, man, delete that whole section. I messed up. But two, my target investors are already in real estate. So brokers and agents, I'm not going to come in. I don't need to come in there and teach you how to comp properties or whatever the case may be. But I know that there are other areas of, for example, if you're an agent, there are other areas of your life that you probably need help in, and that I have a strong skill set in. A lot of agents are not very tech savvy. So their CRMs are kind of just jumbo garbage. Their follow-up processes are all over the place, in notebooks and stuff like that. So I actually will go give talks on CRM, on CRM setup. I actually help a lot of people with their content. So I developed a whole system for developing about between 30 and 50 pieces of content in just in 4 or 5 hours. Most of it is automated. The 4 or 5 hours, most of that is spent actually filming. And so I broke that down and kind of created a course that I go around and I speak at these events, and I kind of break down that course as well. So the idea is to actually bring something of real value to them. And then, once that establishes a level of credibility there and integrity and trust. And once I'm on the stage, and of course I'm going to mention, that I raised capital for real estate and passive investing, that's slid in there all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But and so if they're interested in that, then they're going to come up and talk to me, or when we're talking afterwards, we'll get to that topic.
Very cool. And have you ever considered switching your avatar, or just including more avatars? I guess, because that's one of my things that I've been thinking about is it's going to be tough to just constantly go after that same avatar. You're kind of, I understand the concept of niching down and blue sea or whatever, but I feel like there could be a lot more opportunities to speak if I would just open up who I speak to, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, it's funny you say that, because I changed my avatar to real estate professionals from a different discipline, just because I was having difficulty connecting with that community. I knew they were great potential limited partners, they were well funded, and they were looking for diversification into real estate, but I just couldn't quite get a good connection or get a good foothold in that community. But there are other communities like the tech community. Definitely, I could, think about speaking at those types of events. And right now I am focused on the real estate profession, helping the real estate professionals for, a myriad of different reasons. But I've definitely thought about expanding as I begin to grow and I'm able to find ways I can bring value to those other communities as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I'm really inspired by, because I get out there a lot, and I'm on, small stage, but stages and that sort of thing. I'm usually, somebody at the front of the room, and I'm always talking about real estate investing as a subject matter. But, thinking of something else that may be outside of that, where I could bring value to those people, such as, social media and content creation, and just even the importance of building a thought leadership platform. If you're looking to grow a business, comes to mind in terms of things that I've invested a lot of time into, making a lot of mistakes and also figuring out what works and what doesn't work too, is something that I could speak to.
Yeah, no, I've loved following your journey, Matt. I always like to see your content pop up on my feed. It's great.
So Hollis, how does the, there's a lot of conversation about, one-to-one and one-to-many. One-to-many is the content, the being the person at the front of the room, being, and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad these days, but almost like in this digital environment, notability is almost become more important than credibility.
Oh yeah.
So how do you parlay, the one-to-many to the one-to-one? Because the one-to-ones are going to have to happen at some point in time. And how does that conversion process happen from the top of that funnel?
Yeah, sure. So there's two arms to it, right? So on the social media side, and this is something I'm kind of recently learning, and people are probably noticing this now. I'm in everybody's DMs. Like usually I was trying to rely kind of on the engagement and, the comments and those sort of things. But now I'm much more active in DMs because technically those are one-to-ones, right? Obviously they're not in person or on the phone or anything like that. But there's a greater level of trust that you're building by working in the DMs. The other side of it is when I go to speak at an event, and this is something that anybody can steal. It's not some crazy hack that I made up. If your CRM has the ability to create forms, which almost every CRM does, they basically are giving you a free contact exchange website, right? There's a website that pops up and it just has the form on there. All you do is you make a QR code of that form, right? Or for that page. And when everyone's going around the networking event showing you their phone, like, oh yeah, scan my QR code. Most of those are for some random third-party app, whatever. Mine is a link into my CRM. So when you scan my QR code and we exchange contacts in person at an event, you're instantly placed into my funnel. So I start following up with you that night while I'm still at the event. Like you're getting texts from me like, oh man, great to meet you. Like, when can we meet for coffee? And you're like, oh wait, he's standing over there. But that's the way I leverage that one-to-many into one-to-ones, is that I automate that process of scheduling the one-on-one from the one-to-many.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Because like there's like the whole thing. I mean, my dad was the old school sales. He was really good at it. He was a grinder. And he was like the guy that would bring like 100 business cards to an event and try to get his business cards to as many people as possible. His mantra was the ABCs of closing. I was like, Dad, what is that? It's like, always be closing. And I think that, I don't even bring my business cards around anywhere. Let's just exchange contact information. Where are you on LinkedIn? Are you LinkedIn? Let's link up. So I think that what you're doing is a lot more powerful because, you always think you're going to remember to follow up with them or remember that person. Like, okay, this person made such an impactful impact on me during this event that there's no way I can possibly forget them. Well, I got a call from a guy that I've been trying to think of as what his first name was to pull up my contacts list for 5 years. And he finally called me today because he saw a Facebook ad that we'd been sponsoring this past month. And it's like, hey man, I've been meaning to reach out to you. I was like, Nate, I've been trying to think of who you are for 5 damn years, So no, that's awesome advice, Hollis. That's amazing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, and it works with any system. So if you're familiar with Zapier or Zapier or whatever you call it, anybody, like, you can share someone your LinkedIn info, and even with that, you can start your automation. So automating that follow up process, however you want to do it, with whatever tools you want to use. I use Go High Level. You can use Active Campaign, whoever. Everybody does it, and just automate that process, man. It's so simple and so powerful that you'll be surprised how many meetings you just get booked from that.
Yeah.
So tell us about you get lunch or you get coffee with that person. What's usually the how does that usually go?
Yeah, so this is again a process that I'm still fine tuning, but what I'm starting to do better is some sort of pre-qualification, because when you meet people at an event, there are typically two groups of people who, we'll call it three groups of people who you meet. There are people who you want to learn from, people who want to learn from you, and then your ideal client, right? That's really the person who you want to meet with, but you're going to catch all three of those people, and which is great. You want to reach up and down at the same. You always want to reach up and down at the same time. So you do a little bit of pre-qualification, just so you can understand what type of lunch this is going to be, or what type of coffee meeting or phone call or whatever this is going to be. And it helps me a lot to set my expectation, right? Because if you go in here thinking like, oh, this is a guy who got a high net worth $1 million investor here, and this guy's like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to learn what a cap rate is, if you could help me out, then that's like disappointing for me, and I find myself to be less engaged. So doing that pre-qualification is really important. But then we'll focus on, if it is somebody who is the ideal client, who's able to invest and interested, it's really about finding out what their goals are and what their situation is. Because part of my mission with 24 Capital Group, like the slogan says, is take back your time, own your future, right? So where are the areas, like, why do you feel like you need more time? Why do you want cash flow? Why do you want to make this type of investment? Because I tell everybody, this is not the most lucrative form of real estate investing, right? Your cash on cash return is higher if you go be a landlord. If you have time for it and you want to do that, your cash on cash return will be higher.
It can be lower though too.
It could be. It could also be lower.
Yeah. Come to Rochester. We'll show you how that works.
Also, if you do own, some people haven't bought their first like owner occupied property, right? So if you're going to do owner occupied 4-unit and live in 1 unit, there's not a better bang for your buck that you can probably find out there. So these are all kind of things I want to find out, because my goal is to really help them get to their destination on their journey.
So what is the so where does that pre-qualification process start?
So in the automated follow-up. So I'm just throwing out kind of softball questions. I'm not sure if you guys have ever read the book, The Way of the Wolf? It's the straight line system by, I forget the author now, but Google the straight line system. And it's basically this cadence to closing or to sales, which is just setting up a very logical order to how you ask people questions, right? Like, you're not going to ask someone, hey, what's your total net worth and liquidity, before you ask them, what their last name is or something like that, right? So in my follow-up sequence, there's just a very logical and like gradual sequence to the questions that are asked. And if they answer them, great. Like, obviously nobody's forced to answer any of the questions. Like, I'll still show up to the meeting. But that's kind of where that pre-qualification process starts. And like the last leg of that is an actual form, which, asks all the questions we really want to know, like what type of investing, what's your experience, what do you really want to do, how much are you looking to invest this year, those sort of things. That's kind of the last step to that.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I've I'm not a huge volume, so really with me is like I probably have maybe 3 or 4 one-on-one meetings a month, right? Most of the other stuff that I'm doing is one to many. But and I love putting the ladder down for people and giving them help. But I mean, I'd like to know, kind of early on, if that's what the thing is going to be, because some people are going to be like, Matt, I've seen what you've been doing and posting about real estate. I'm interested in real estate investing. That can mean a lot of different things, right?
Sure.
That could be, I have a very high income job. I think I want to invest in real estate and own the asset myself and run it. But after talking to you, I'm going to understand why that might not be the greatest idea for my goals. Or it could be somebody that was scrappy like myself when I was 22 years old, that's just looking to, do my first deal or do that very thing. But I mean, one of the questions I ask when I first meet with them on the one-on-one is, and this is kind of like, it's kind of going like, like a shot over the bow, but I do in a soft way, is like, Hey, I want to, give you the most amount of my time today. Like, what do you hope to expect to get out of meeting today? Like, and I asked that very early on. And people will be pretty transparent with it there. So then I can like, sort of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do at this, at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, there's like, I know I get exhausted with DMs when people are DMing me. So I kind of like project the way I like to do things, like on the way I do things, if that makes sense. So it's like, after somebody sends me 2 DMs, I'm just like, what's your phone number? I'm going to pick up the phone and call you.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Sure. I'm like high tech and low tech. I'm like, I can upload and download more information in a phone conversation with you than I can through via DM.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great point. I offer that phone call as early and often as possible because, it's non-committal. Like we could make it a 2-minute phone call if we want. Like it doesn't need to be like a 30-minute block set aside. And to your point, it is so much. It's so much faster to just do it all through a phone call sometimes.
Yeah, and then you can work in a lot of those questions kind of naturally. So I'm with Matt. I do the same. I want to get them on the phone and just have a conversation with them, and then after I've kind of pre-screened them through that initial conversation, if I'm ready, if I think they're ready to take it another step further, then I'll do something a little more formal, like a Zoom. I'll have them bring in any decision makers. A lot of times they'll have partners or a spouse or something. So I'll try to set something up and coordinate it with everybody. But really, if we can get face-to-face, that's ideal. And a lot of times investors that are putting significant money into deals, they will want to meet you face-to-face, even if they don't live in your same geography. So making that happen, I think is critical.
Yeah, I'm a huge, huge fan of the face-to-face meeting. I want to say like 60% of people who have invested in deals with me over all the real estate deals I've done since forever have been people who I've met face-to-face.
Yeah. So what kind of deals are you looking for now?
Man, I love some mobile home parks. Actually, there's one I wanted to talk to you about since you're upstate New York somewhere. But I love mobile home parks. So again, I'm trying to help people to generate, and myself, of course, generate cash flow. So I'm looking at assets that are still cash flowing in the current economic environment, and mobile home parks is one of them. Multifamily apartments, I'll look at some. It's really specific right now that the deals that are actually going to cash flow are kind of few and far in between at the moment. So, and I also like short-term rentals, partnering with really strong group in that area and or in that asset class, and those guys knock it out of the park every time. So I'll do a deal with them any day.
I was just listening to a YouTube last night. I forget the guy's name, but he's like the doom and gloom, like the housing market's going to crash. He's been saying it for years. And he did have some really good facts on the short-term rental space and just giving the numbers that, like, I think he was talking about Phoenix in particular. Over the last 1 year, the inventory of Airbnbs has like quadrupled or something. Yep. And these are all things that haven't really been felt in the marketplace yet. So I don't know. I'm gun shy on short-term rentals personally.
Yeah, I think to be honest, if you're not going to go all in, you should be gun shy because of that fact. Like, it's not just Phoenix; it's anywhere that doesn't have extremely strict legislation against short-term rentals has been inundated through COVID, right? Because of the travel restrictions, and everybody just kind of figured out that's where the money was going to be. So the reason I like this group so much is because they're so high level. Like, our Airbnbs have mini golf courses in the back and like tiki bars and full court basketball courts. If you want to compete with us, you're welcome to.
Right. You're getting dollars.
Well, yeah, it's that unique value proposition. I mean, it's important to any business, regardless of whether it's Airbnbs or multifamily or whatever. But speaking of mobile home parks, so, I mean, we can definitely talk in the green room after the show. I definitely have experience in mobile home parks, not only in New York but also in Michigan.
Oh, awesome.
But definitely, yeah. If Jeff Cook of Cook Properties is listening out there, Cook Properties is actually the largest owner of mobile home communities in New York State. Oh, and by the way, if you ever go to a manufactured housing community, what is it? It's the MHI. Yeah, it's like the Institute or something like that. Never call it mobile homes or even mobile home parks. It's manufactured housing communities. I got corrected so many times when I went to an MHA conference. I was like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore.
There you go.
But you know what? I think you're right, because you know, you tell people about mobile homes and they instantly go like Eminem 8 Mile with the you know, Delta parked in the front, like the 1927 cars out front, and you know, spare tires everywhere and mattresses and all sorts of stuff. But really, when you look at them, they are communities. They're really nice, quiet places, modest homes for people to live, and it really does address a serious problem globally, which is affordable housing, which is something I'm really passionate about as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that even with the elevated cost of manufacture of homes right now, I mean, you can still get, like, let's say a heart home, probably like God, I think they're coming in a 76 long single wide for, I think, 60,000 bucks. When the cost of construction for stick built stuff is way more than that in terms of per housing unit. I mean, so it's definitely addressing that. The one thing is that we do have to, from a regulation and zoning standpoint, is get over this NIMBYism. We can, there's a lot of for those of you don't know, NIMBYism is not in my backyard. Everybody's, a lot of people support affordable housing, but they don't want to have it in their backyard. So I think we need to get over that, because, and we need to invest in that. And the thing is that a lot of these communities that we see in New York State are a lot older and fit that description of, like, the abandoned tires and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've gone down to, I would consider owning one in, like, Arizona or Florida. I mean, you go to these places and they're just beautiful, beautiful communities. I think in upstate Western New York and Michigan, the weather kicks the crap out of these things.
Yeah.
And they end up showing their age like very, very quickly.
Yeah, we can definitely talk in the green room. We've got some potential opportunities out there. So
Nice. I grew up next to a trailer court, and it was originally a farm field, and the trailer court was like up on the hill. And I just remember the farmer sold the field to the trailer park owner, and then all of a sudden the trailers just descended all the way down through this once lush green cornfield into trailers. They've been, I'd say we never had any problems. My parents have never locked the doors, and we never had any crime. We never really felt like it was bad. Sure, there's a lot of trailers in the park that have become dilapidated and they're busted up and they're vacant, and there's vacant lots, and there's, but there's also sections of the community where there's like really nice trailers, manicured, like the person's landscaping. So, I really think it just comes down to the person that's in it is how it's going to look. So
for sure. And as an operator, I actually started flipping individual mobile homes last year, because it's super cheap and it's kind of like a no-brainer project just to do on the side. But I also learned that there's so much you can do to beautify a community like that, where there are a lot of older homes. I mean, there are people who are doing incredible things with their mobile homes that they purchase and they own, and they modify them, upgrade them, and add additions and all sorts of stuff that you can do. And to Matt's point, because of the low entry cost, that allows you a little bit more room to enhance it down the road.
Yeah.
So some policy recommendations, I think that would be at the federal level. We're talking about Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. The financing is really, really difficult on chattel. They call it chattel property and that sort of thing. So there's only a couple of mortgage companies that are in the space, but I think that if we could, with a pen stroke, in allowing Fannie and Freddie residential mortgages to be on manufactured homes, I think would be a complete game changer when it comes to affordable housing in this country. So that's one thing that I've been a very, very strong proponent for, to allow the inclusion of those.
Yeah, we definitely something that the narrative needs to be changed on. I think, like you said, it's this idea like, oh yeah, it'd be great to build some housing, but then you try to do it and you know kind of be shut down before you even get started. So, and it's just because that's the image people have in their minds are just like everyone in the mobile home park does meth, like,
Yeah.
but that's obviously not the case.
Mm-hmm. So, Hollis, what are you seeing out there in the market in terms of deals you've been underwriting? Like, what's your pulse?
Oh man, it's thin. It's a very thin pulse is what it is. So I actually have changed tack a little bit on the types of deals I'm underwriting. Like I said, I'm not looking at a ton of multifamily unless it's in very specific areas. I'm actually looking in the Northeast for multifamily, small multifamily, right now, because I think there are some pockets of opportunity there remaining. And you know, prices haven't really come down the way they should to reflect, you know, the cost of borrowing capital right now. So it's definitely there are not a ton of deals, but my strategy is more so focused on partnering with the solid operators, because you know, partnering with someone who's kind of like I said, reaching up, getting somebody who's more experienced, who's been through a couple of market cycles, ups and downs, who can understand how to navigate these waters a little bit, you know, much better than I would be able to, has been helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, Mark, I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, what I've been seeing out there is that, you know, bid ask spreads are really, really still wide between seller expectations. And I mean, in Western New York and Rochester, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. We're at about, I think, a quarter of the sales volume across all investment asset classes in Rochester, from the peak in 2020. I think the peak was in 2022 in Rochester, actually. So it's a quarter. I mean, and this is the first time in my life, like, where I haven't had to be the one like calling brokers and keeping top of mind with them. Like, I'm starting to get calls from commercial real estate brokers now. Which is actually kind of nice, you know. But yeah, no, I'm seeing that. I'm just wondering what what the catalyst is going to be for these bid ask spreads to converge, because you know, a lot of these sellers, they have properties that are cash flowing. Like, if interest rates go up, you know, reset 2%, 3%. Yeah, it's going to be painful, but you know, rents have been so strong. It's not like they're, you know, have been in violation of their DSCR covenants or anything like that. So I'm really like curious to see what happens and like what's going to make a capitulation happen, especially in the multifamily space. Office we've actually been buying office the past couple years, very, very opportunistically. You know, we bought a building that was majority government office tenants on long-term leases. And I mean, government tenants stay for decades and decades and decades. And it was, you know, redlined by the investment community because it was an office as a product, you know. But now we're seeing the banks starting to pull back, you know, asking term sheets on a office deal that's like a screaming hot deal opportunity. They're like max 50% loan to value. So when I heard that from 4 banks, I was like, okay, something's going on here. Like, the Fed is sucking liquidity out of the market. And I think that this is a product class that's going to get absolutely hammered even more. So we've just been kind of sitting on the sidelines, waiting for that to happen before we do any more office acquisitions.
Yeah, a couple points there. The office asset class, that product in certain markets is like decimated. You have downtowns of cities that are, you know, at 40% occupancy. I mean, it's just kind of the culture shift, I guess, from COVID and relocation and all those other types of things happening as well. So I think overall, in my humble opinion, I'm not like some economics guru or anything like that, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think certain cities where you've seen mass construction happening, right? Like there are places in the Sun Belt that the population isn't growing enough for them to absorb the amount of construction that they're seeing. So I think places like that could be in jeopardy, and could kind of start to affect the overall tones of the debt market. But in places that don't have a lot of new construction, like Western New York, for example, right? The people aren't like rushing to build rental properties upstate New York. I think um, those prices. I don't know. I don't feel like prices in those types of areas will really come down unless you start to see a lot more of those bridge loans from the past couple of years coming due. I saw a property the other day that was clearly please help us, we're about to go under sale. And obviously those prices could start to influence the market, but a lot of those are coming off market because people, I don't know, maybe they're like ashamed to present to the world. But I think it's going to be tough to really bring prices down in specific markets based on the current situation.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of brokers recently and just done verbal offers because, it's a lot easier than writing an LOI. And I would tell you, they are still convinced that they can sell these products at these high prices. And I feel like I'm making better than I should offers just to try to get deals done, where, it might be a strategic location that I'm interested in for whatever reason. And still nothing. It's just like, no, don't even bother writing that up. The owner's not going to even look at it. So that's kind of the reaction that I'm getting from commercial brokers up here is that they think they can sell this stuff. And, like Matt said, the volume's down significantly. So
yeah, here's the thing that I'm telling you, Mark, is that they know they can't sell it. It's like, behind closed doors, I talk to them and they're just like, I've had multiple conversations, and I think it's just like, they can't tell you that when they're representing a listing, but they're like, these sellers have like, ridiculous expectations for it. And sometimes it's like, I don't know. I started in residential real estate, started in 2006. My dad, when after Lehman Brothers collapsed, he was just on he loved being a listing agent, even though there was, after Lehman Brothers collapsed, there was a little bit of a problem. But he had 50 listings and he was just like, yeah, the more inventory I have, the better position I'm going to be when the market picks up. So I think that maybe that's how they're playing it. But I mean, I think that, we can pay any price you want, Mr. Seller, if you're willing to agree to our terms. So, we'll pay twice as much as it's really worth if you'll hold the mortgage on a 200-year, term with a negative amortization and no payments for 10 years.
Right.
So,
I made that offer before. Yeah, it's so true. I think so. I actually, again, behind closed doors, had a broker tell me, listen, volume is so low that to get listings, people are going out and just promising the world to a seller, like, oh yeah, give us your building, sign on with us, we're gonna get you XYZ. Obviously, knowing that it's going to be a challenge, but like you said, the action is just kind of at a standstill, and obviously that's how the brokers feed their families probably. So they're out there pounding the pavement and I think kind of pigeonholing themselves in a way because obviously if this broker's always going to just give you a ridiculous price, I'm not going to call you, bro.
No, they're wasting their time. You want to be the third broker, right? So they got this broker, they'll have another broker that still can't sell it, and then we'll swoop in and say, this is how you're going to price it, and we're actually going to sell it.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, Mark, you're talking about you want to be firstborn, second married, and third listing agent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that, there's still that thing. I mean, that, are we expecting a, 1031 buyer out of California with more money than brains to, buy this stuff up in a negative leverage position? Some of the stuff you can't even, it's like, I try to underwrite it with well, how much equity would I have to bring to the table? And it'd be 50 to 60% just to actually meet debt service coverage ratio of 1.2 or 1.25.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that there's, the numbers are speaking for themselves in terms of other larger city markets, especially in the Sun Belt, like you talked about, Hollis, with, some of these big cities are having 20% negative rent growth, 20%. Right. And they have more construction in the pipe. And that's the risky thing with development is development seems sexy, but from the time an idea comes in a developer's mind is like, okay, I'm going to build this, it could be 2 to 3 years or even 4 years until the keys land in the resident's hand. a lot can change in that time
Yeah.
in that time period. I think that's kind of what we're seeing in those markets. So, Mark, maybe we got to.
They don't want to run away, right? They're committed now. The project's halfway done.
Oh
They've
yeah.
got all this money in it. They've got to see it through.
Yeah. So maybe Mark and I are going to be, we're gonna we're gonna hit the plains, man. We're gonna hit the runway and go to these Sunbelt markets when there's blood in the street, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is tough though, because to your point, the development game, like you said, it looks really good. Like you see development deals with like 30 IRRs,
Mhm.
but the risk is also just incredibly high. It's a little bit, honestly, to be frank, it's a little bit too high for me. Like I prefer, I don't really like development deals at all. But yeah, it's. I think I don't like going into markets that had 20% rent growth in the first place.
Right.
It's just not realistic, right? Because you get used to that. You're like, oh man, went up 10% last year, another 15% this year, 30% this year. Like now in your mind, we're just always going to be at a minimum of 10% rent growth. And now, you start to get in these over levered positions. I prefer the market that during COVID had 10%, like tops. It was like, peak.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time it was 7, 5, just
I still underwrite with yesterday's rent too. I'll never underwrite with like today's rent. I'm always going to be conservative just for that reason. I think we will see some more compression in rental rates.
Yeah. I always do in my underwriting, no rent increases for the first one or 2 years, just to see, because to your point, like usually rent increases are like based on mini development. Kind of. I'm thinking, a tenant's going to move out. I'm going to do a project and fix it up, spruce it up, release it. Depending on what the timing of the leases, that could be a year and change from now, right? So I like to just imagine I'm going to keep the rents where they are and see if we can make any money.
Right.
So I had a question for the group, and maybe you guys can give some color on this. What have you seen or heard in their opportunity zone space? Because that's a little bit of a. The reason why I asked this is because I just sold a 2-family property I owned for a while. I owned it since 2017, and my return on equity went like down a lot, meaning that the property got worth a lot more because there's a 2-family property, a lot of owner occupants in that space bidding up the prices there. So I sold it. I didn't want to do a 1031 because I didn't want to have a 1031 exchange, because I didn't want to have a gun against my head to find a deal to trade into. So, I just basically took the cash and I'm like, all right, well, do I do a cost segregation on one of my bigger deals and then try to, offset that? Or maybe do I flip that money into opportunity zone, even an opportunity zone fund? Because there's developers that are building housing in opportunity zone areas. And some of these developers are getting, have like a 10 or 15 year regulatory agreement with the municipality on a pilot where they have like the real estate taxes in this brand new building really, really low to be able to offer affordable rents based upon certain levels of, area median income and all that sort of thing. And then at the end of 15 years, then they can go up to market. So I'm kind of looking at deals like that to partner as an LP possibly with these funds as well. So what are you kind of seeing in the opportunity zone space, if anything, if you've been following it?
I haven't been following it too much, but the research that I've done, I would say you're correct. Like it's not a bad play. My only fear would be that like after the 15 years, the building's just been run into the ground a bit.
Yeah, I think that on 10, if something's brand new built, I think that this is the concern over a long period of time. But the thing is that where you can look at the HUD's fair market rents based upon incomes, they're actually not too bad in some markets based compared to market rents. There's not much of a delta there. So it's just something I'm like thinking about. I believe 180 days from 2 days ago to figure out whether I'm going to put that money into a fund and self-elect. But no, I've just been like following that space over the past few years. But we haven't had much opportunity zone activity happening in Rochester. So
isn't the infill that they're doing? Isn't that opportunity zone the next leg of the infill?
Yeah, all of downtown Rochester is in the Opportunity Zone. So downtown city center, the Center City Business District, and also the new Interloop North is as well. But Hollis, what were you going to say?
No, I was just gonna say that there's a guy in the mastermind that Mark and I are in who's really savvy when it comes to opportunity zones and what's the other tax abatement? I forget the other term there is, but basically just don't really have to pay very much in tax for a long time. But those I think those can be great strategies. I haven't really dabbled in any of them myself, but they're definitely something that I always open those emails when they come through for deals that are in opportunity zones.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, we got 5 minutes. How do you want to wrap up the show?
I don't know. You got any words of wisdom, Hollis or Matt, that you want to share with the audience? I know Matt's got some.
So, on a personal note, I've found a ton of similarities between parenthood and real estate investing.
Nice.
So my son is 19 months probably, and it's definitely been quite the whirlwind up and down. But one thing that has really taught me is patience, and even the little things equal progress. Like, now he's starting to speak now, but he's saying words that we've been saying to him for a very long time, right? And you think he doesn't hear you when you're trying to tell him to say thank you or please, and it's just like, he's such a rude infant with whatever that means, right? But then suddenly, like, you hand him a spoon for dinner, and he's like, "Thank you," right? So,
Yeah.
I think the same is true when it comes to real estate investing. I know for a long time, you're pounding the pavement, making phone calls, trying to find a deal, and you think all these different systems you're building and putting into place aren't working. And then one day, like, you go to do it, and it's like, oh no, there's a deal. Oh, it's sold. Oh, it's wow, I made money. So definitely, being patient and keeping at the little things, trust the process a little bit. That's something that I've just learned. So there's my gem.
Yeah. Well, I've got a 2-year-old going on 3, and she was in the backseat of the car in her car seat, and mom was telling a story to the kids about when I got stung in the head by a bumblebee, and like I ended up falling in the mud because I was trying to get to the hospital. And she like listened to the whole story, and she's been like repeating it over and over again. So it's just so cool to watch those like progressions when you think like, okay, so 3-year-old, she's not really paying attention to a story like that. But as soon as I got home, she was like, "You fell in the mud. You got stung by a bee." And she was just like going through the whole story. And I was like, "Oh yeah, mom told you that story?" And they were like, "Oh, she was in the back. We weren't really talking to her, but she picked it all up." So it was cute.
Yeah, be careful. They are always listening. Yeah, my dog. Now it was like we had this rule: don't end a sentence on that word that you don't want them to say, right? And so we had that rule for a while, right? Because my wife and I use pretty salty language once in a while, and then now she's picking up the words in between in terms of these phrases, and I'm like, okay, we have to like go strictly, general audience right now.
Oh man.
Okay, so is this a Mark? Is this a new format with the stream?
I think I just
Brenda.
realized that. Yeah, I just realized I could do that.
Yeah, we have somebody that's watching out here. Brenda, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Make sure to tune in next week. We'll have another rock star guest on the show.
Oh man, you think I'm a rock star? I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would have settled for ordinary star.
But
Cool.
no, I think in closing it up though, I think with all three of us being dads, and I'm a relatively new father too. I have a 3-year-old. We have a baby boy on the way, so we're doubling our unit count, people.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Way to scale.
Yeah. So I am. So I think that being a new parent is almost like it's definitely a spiritual journey. It was for me, and it has actually taught me more about myself than any other like milestone in my life, really. And so it's a really amazing experience. I was scared as hell before I became a dad, but now I like it.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. I did not want to be a dad, to be honest with you. It's not just never something I wanted to do. But it's kind of awesome. Of course, I named my son after me because I'm vain like that. So, but it really has been really an awesome experience, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm also Mark. My father was Mark, and my wife shot it down. So my son is not Mark. She's like, no, we're not repeating. We have different middle names, so I'm not a junior, but I got Luke instead. So
Sweet.
Nice.
yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into the show. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next Thursday.
See you guys.